Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to give you 3 things you must do when you're communicating with a narcissist. Okay. There's a lot of techniques around this, and I'm going to try to give you, these 3 big ones. As most of you probably know, there's gray rock, yellow rock, all these different things. I can tell you that applying these things in practicality are a lot of times a little more challenging. And that's why I like kind of working with people on an ongoing basis for a while to help them internalize it. But nonetheless, I'm going to try to share 3 really good tips with you in this video. Let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel. 70% of you watching this are not subscribed, so please do that. It helps me. It helps more people find me. All right, 3 tips. Let's dive into this. Number 1, I think that so often I see clients get stuck in kind of the back and forth. And narcissists are master at this, right? Of kind of sucking us in to this narrative. And as much as we try to not get emotional and not react to it and all of those kinds of things, we do sometimes get sucked in. My late husband Thomas used to call it getting sucked into the vortex. Okay, because as hard as he would try to stay out of that vortex, he would just sometimes find himself right back in it, repeating old unhealthy patterns in his communication with his ex-wife. So you want to really try not to get sucked into the, well, I want this. No, I want this. No, I can only do this day. No, I can only do that day. Well, this won't work for me. What I always like to do is like, okay, let's back up. Let's take a big picture view and let's try to brainstorm multiple solutions if we can. Okay, because when you get into this, well, that doesn't work for me, I want to do this. And they say, no, that doesn't work for me, and I want to do this. Then the whole like he said, she said, back and forth just continues, and you don't get anywhere. But when you're dealing with a narcissistic person, one of the little tricks that I like to use is giving them options to choose from, because it gives the feeling of them being in power, and they almost feel like it was their idea, not yours. But in order to do that, you have to kind of pull your brain out of this back and forth argument that you're in with them and go, okay, what do a couple different alternatives look like? Is there some sort of happy medium here in between what we both are wanting? Or maybe I can make what they want work with maybe one small tweak. A great way to do this is to back up and say, okay, what's my concern about this? What's the actual issue? Is the issue that I can't take the kid that night because I have something else going on? Is the issue that we've been on a different weekend rotation, and now if you flip it, all the things that I have planned are, going to be messed up? Or the child's been not feeling well, and I don't think it's good to transition them multiple times back and forth. So maybe if the other parent wants this specific day, how do I build that in and make it a little bit longer stretch where they're not shuffling the child back and forth as many times? Whatever the thing is, it's hard without a, real specific thing to try to give you some ideas. But what my point is that I want you to take a step back, take a breath. A lot of times it's very helpful to get another set of eyes or another brain. 2 heads are better than 1, as they say, and to try to brainstorm this and step back from it and go, okay, what are some potential solutions? Instead of getting so granular and getting stuck in, that won't work for me, and the other parent says that won't work for me, and you're just stuck on this merry-go-round of back and forth, which isn't going to get you to a solution. Number 2, limit communication to one issue at a time. I see this all the time. It's like I will tell somebody, okay, let's send a message to the other parent and ask them if they can pick the child up from school at 3 p.m. on Friday. Okay, let's just say that's the message we're trying to communicate. Would you be able to pick the child up from school at 3 p.m.? Or will picking up the child from school at 3 p.m. work for you? Something like that. And then inevitably I say, okay, well, did you send that message? Yeah, I did. And then they came back and they said, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, can you read me the message you sent? And inevitably it goes something like, would you be able to pick the child up from school at 3 p.m. Would that work for you? And since we have Thanksgiving break or Christmas break or whatever coming up next week, I was thinking we could move my Monday to Wednesday, and that way we would each have 4 blocks of and then what happens, okay, and a lot of times there's one more. There'll usually be like 2 or 3 things. Here's what happens when you do that with a narcissist. The ones that they don't want to address, they're just going to ignore. They're just going to not respond and act like they never saw it. They're going to just answer the things that they wanted to. And then it's going to come back and it's going to be like, well, okay, that's an answer to the other 2, but not this one. Then you're going to have to be sending another note back going, well, okay, did you see my comment about the first thing? And, and it just starts kind of psychologically weakening your position because it just becomes more and more diluted in the chaos of the back and forth. And so one of the things I tell people is really focus on just one thing at a time. And I know that can be painful and it's sort of like makes it go slow and I got to wait till I get that resolved before I go into this one. But even though I know a lot of the parenting apps, there are multiple, you can do separate threads for separate issues and all of that. And that's fine. That helps a little bit. But I would say the vast majority of the time, if possible, I prefer to only be communicating about one issue at a time. And I wait until I have that resolved before I communicate about the next issue. And the other thing I'll tell you, this is just a little tidbit I'll throw in that isn't one of my 3, but a lot of times, if you're responding real quick to a narcissist like this, they're going to match you. They're just going to be like, boom, 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 boom. One of the ways to control the communication and the kind of the harassment level of the communication is by just slowing it down. Like if you can wait several hours to respond to that, or you don't need to respond to it today and you can wait till tomorrow, wait till tomorrow. Like don't let them trigger you and trigger your emotions and your anxiety into, boom, I'm going to fire off a response. Because then you just, boom, you get a response right back. And then you're worked up again, right? And it's a method that they use to keep you kind of emotionally dysregulated. So you have to kind of take that power back and go, okay, well, I don't really need to answer this immediately. I mean, you do have to think about your court orders. Sometimes you're given a parameter of how long you have to respond to something. So I definitely always want you complying with your court orders, but don't feel like you have to answer immediately. Okay. And a lot of times, if you stop and you think about it, after a few hours, you'll kind of be like, oh, I probably shouldn't have responded that way. How many times have you sent a message and then after the fact gone, oh, that probably wasn't the best response? You need that gap again to help you emotionally regulate in this process. Okay. So don't let them sort of use that tactic to bully you into responding right away. Just give it a little bit of time. Okay. The world's not going to fall apart if it takes you some time to respond to it. You have to ignore attacks and insults. This is tip number 3. Ignore attacks and insults. Don't respond yourself emotionally in that way. And also, not just attacks and insults, but one of the things that I see, particularly people who are like the codependent or people pleaser person who've been in a relationship with a narcissist, is they justify. They explain why they want to do what they want to do. Well, if you can pick our child up from the daycare at 3 p.m. on Friday, that'll make things easier for the child because they won't have to be with me for a couple hours and then you come get them from me and then they're going, from one of us to the other and it'll just be smoother and da-da. You don't have to explain all that. You can say something simple like, I think it would be easiest for the child if you just pick them up at daycare at 3 p.m. Okay, you can say that, but you don't need to give this long justification for why you want to do what you're suggesting to do. You just always want to be focused on the best interest of the child, but from the court's perspective, but you don't need to explain that to the other parent or justify. And I think that's something that we've been real conditioned to do when we're coming out of that narcissistic relationship, the explaining, because we're always kind of trying to walk on eggshells, right? And we don't want to upset them. And so we feel like if we explain and we tell them and whatever, that it'll keep things calm. It'll keep them from being upset. But you don't need to do that. The more words you have, the more potential you have for conflict, the more potential you have for them to manipulate it, the more potential you have for them to harass you with it, the more potential you have for them to use those little loopholes, respond to what they choose to, not respond to what they don't want to, and all of that. So just keep it really, really short and sweet. Don't justify, stick to the logistical pieces of the issues. That's 3 of my communication tips. I could probably list out 100 of them if you really sat me down and asked me to do that. So if you'd like to learn more communication tips like this and get more help in dealing with your narcissistic co-parent, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page. You can book a time to speak to a member of my staff and learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on this journey. See you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.